All right, so to continue with the line of thought about checking to get value from your hands, we're going to pay attention to what's going on table 3. First of all, I make a aggressive 3-bet from the small blind here, and I wouldn't recommend doing this against just any player. I have history with this MNF guy. He's playing 36-24, so he's very active. And I know for a fact that he's going to open a lot more hands from under the gun than the average person. So my double-suited jacks become a very strong top end of my range versus his playable range as well. So my 3-bet is strictly for value. If it gets 4-bet by either people left in the pot, I'm absolutely going to call. He proceeds to flat call me, and I'm going to hit a very, very favorable flop for my hand. I'm in here now with the third nut flush. It is somewhat unfortunate that I have the 10 as well, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. I lead out here for just around half the size of the pot, which is something that you've seen in my videos I do before on my paired boards and flush boards. Anytime I consider to be a lockdown board, if I'm going to continuation bet, I think it's most beneficial to you to be betting around half the size of the pot with your entire range when you do bet. That way you can be in there with air, you can be in there with flushes, you can be in there with sets, and you really leave your opponent guessing. So he just flat calls me here, which is something that I'm happy about but also not happy about. I would be much happier if he had to raise me on the flop. If he raises me, it allows him to have a lot more hands that I'm way ahead of than if he just flat calls. If he were to raise the flop, I would gladly get the money in because I'm going to expect him to raise me with a set of kings, a set of nines. I really don't think he's going to have too many sets of sixes after raising under the gun, but he might. It also allows him to raise with like king 9 or say ace king with the ace of diamonds and nothing else. These are all hands I expect him to raise me with, and I don't necessarily think you're always going to get raised here by the nut flush. This is why I'm a little bit wary of when he just calls, whereas the times where he raises, I'm very, very happy about it. But considering the hands that he will flat call me with, other than the ones that already have me beat, such as the ace and high and queen high flush, he's going to flat me with a lot of floats. He's going to flat me with, king XXX. Since it is a 3-bet pot and he does have position on me and he is an active player, I'm going to expect him to try and take the pot away from me quite often here. Because simply put, if I bet and he calls and then I show weakness on the turn, most of the time I'm not going to have it, and he's just going to be able to barrel me on turn and river and get me off my hand. So keeping with that line of thought, I have the option to bet this turn, which to be honest, I do mix it up quite frequently between I'll bet in this spot and I'll check in this spot. But against this specific player, I opt to go for the check call, check river line. All right, so I do eventually just check call this turn, and the river is going to come off a very favorable card given what my plan was as to misrepresent my hand. When the river is going to fall down here with the 10 of spades, it's a great card because it doesn't pair the board, so if I'm trying to represent having kings or nines, this should be something that completely bricks me, whereas he can be viewing this as a great card to take the pot away from you with. I did go into the turn with the plan to check the turn and also check the river to allow him to bet, so I cannot deviate from that plan now. I think if I was going to be betting this river, I should have been betting the turn in the first place. So what I'm trying to get across to you is when you make your plan, you've got to stick with it and just see it through. Like sometimes I am going to get bet on this river by the bigger flush, and sometimes I'm going to get bluffed here by complete air. But by not taking the bet river line, I'm giving him the chance to give me money, whereas if I just lead, he can only call me with actual made hands. So eventually, and sadly for me, he does check behind, and we're going to see his hand in a moment when the hold'em manager pulls it up. But my read was pretty accurate that he's going to float me on the flop with a very wide range. I do expect him to float me with top pair with a high diamond because that removes the flushes possible for me. And I'm somewhat surprised that he did give this up on the river instead of following through. Because his hand just can't really win at showdown all too often.